So Boys Planet, or as I like to call it, Boys a Planet, just had its first episode, which mostly consisted of first round introductions, performances, and star rankings. After some fluff by Star Master Juan Minhyun about global idols and, what appeared to be a miniature Boys Planet stage for mice, the show finally began. Now, this is probably the first time I've seen a show kill excess airtime by opening up and then asking the contestants to rate themselves. Like, the judges are really going to be like, yeah, I'm just going to close my eyes here and take a nap. Please rate yourself and maybe even eliminate yourself. Of course, some brilliant producer must have realized that between the more, math-conscious, modest 1 out of 4-star trainees and maybe the overconfident I gave myself 7 out of 4-star trainees, that they should probably have a lot more than 400 K group and G group stickers in the world's largest gachapon machine. Speaking of gacha, this episode was brought to you by Genshin Impact. Whoa, looks like it's time to mark off this box on my Boys Planet bingo card. Subtle product placement. But yes, this time around, the boys were categorized into K group and G group, standing for Korea and Global, respectively. As a side note, once again, Korean votes will account for 50% weighting alongside the rest of the world's votes because, this is kind of a global show, but not really. There was a litany of content since late December, and little, if any of it, was subtitled or aired for the global audience. So honestly, the voting block is coming in kind of semi-handicapped here. Wait a second, I just need to check off another bingo card square for language barrier drama. Really though, all that self-grading was nothing more than a confidence check. So the boys started walking out with their self-checkout stars in what seemed to be entertainment company-based groups, but then it would later expand to include some random geographic regions. And the first thing that they encountered when coming out was the top 9 seeding gimmick. From that point onwards, for the remainder of the walkouts, the guys would have to compete in random ways for the honor of most comfortable butt. Wow. Of course, Lee Ho-Tech takes the seat. Cube is just casually sending out already debuted people to take leadership spots in survival groups, almost like they're tasting samples at a Costco. And after a brief commentary on the varied vibes of the global group trainees versus K group, an introduction of the vocal masters, rap master, and dance masters takes place here, and we learn that the group that collects the most stars gets an advantage to learn the signal song early. At this point, we get to see the performances of these subgroups where some ability of the audience to judge them for ourselves were subject to the mercy or whims of Mnet's patented evil editing. Now hold on for a moment while I check off that bingo card square. It's the center, free space. So the first company to showcase their trainees was Jellyfish, aka Gunwook and his retainers. You have Park Gunwook, Han Yu-seop, Park Hyun Bin, and Jang Yeo-jun. And if you followed my preliminary rankings, the average ranking for the group members rounds to 3 out of 4, with Park Gunwook having a 4, and Han Yu-seop, Park Han Bin, and Jang Ye-jun, the first 2 had a 3, and then Jang Ye-jun had a 2. Now the group performed Very Very's GBTB, and I noticed that the singers got a bit winded while singing, but the rapper was actually pretty good. And dancing, it seemed to lack in snap, but it was actually still synced and had power. And the editing was suspiciously generous in how it added kind of these impactful earthquakes every time the boys did a stomp. And at the end of the performance, I ended up personally marking it as 6.9 out of 10, whereas the judges gave the whole group a 3 out of 4, which is more like a 7.5 out of 10. Not that far off. Other trainees were surprised by them not being all-stars, which is kind of discouraging to see. You have trainees who are not able to measure this by their own perception, and that sort of means that they're kind of lacking tools to improve independently. Now, the next company to show was Wake One, the G group, with Anthony, who I pre-ranked at a 2, Min at a 2, and Haruto, who's a 1. And I previously ranked this group, and the average came out to 1.7 out of 4. There's also a K group version that I have pre-ranked at a 2.2 out of 4, but for some reason they weren't shown in the first episode. Maybe they'll appear in the second episode. Now, initial impressions of these boys were that they were harmless, but really they weren't harmless at all. They performed Glitch Mode by NCT Dream, and they didn't over-try on the vocals, and they only slightly got winded. And I gave them a 7 out of 10 because of the vocal strains. whereas the judges, they gave Haruto an all-star. So that's a 4 out of 4 stars. The rest got 3 out of 4, which kind of averages out to 3.3 out of 4 or an 8.3 out of 10. Much more generous than I was. Haruto was actually one of the lowest rated trainees from the time attack videos from me, but there he seemed to grab the master's attention, and he even got to do 30 pirouettes on stage. Now, at this point, I'm being lulled into a false confidence that there was another company to look forward to. But then Mnet decided to start showcasing these region-based teams. So you have Taipei now coming out with Chen Quanjui, Qi Sheng Chiang, Dong Dong, and Chen Ren Yu. These names are kind of getting a little bit difficult to say now. But, I have these guys pre-ranked at an average of 2.25 out of 4. So they showed up and they gave a kind of underwhelming performance, mainly due to the background members barely doing anything while the lead, Chen Quanjin, got to showcase his stick play. Now, ideally, you would look at that and say, hey, this guy's carrying the show at this point, but actually, it detracted from it when the background dancers weren't doing anything. And so the vocal was also kind of not really being focused on, and so it was kind of weak. And I guess for me, I gave a generous 6.4 out of 10. But the judges gave the stickman an all-star 4, while they gave the other members a 1 or 2 stars each, which basically means it's a 2.25 out of 4, or roughly a 5.6 out of 10. And so I guess I was more generous this time around. After being lucky enough to see one region perform quite poorly, Mnet started teasing but not showing several other regions like Vietnam, Thailand, and Guangdong. And, they were even kind of nice to them, saying, oh, it's really hard, to dance with this language barrier. In the end, they all fell victim to the infamous editing tactic known as summarizing. But if there's one group that is never summarized, it's Group USA. Jay, who I gave a 4 out of 4, came out with Na Kamden, who had a 2 out of 4 in my preliminary rankings. They performed Jay's piece together. I say Jay's piece because, Na Kamden, he became a backup dancer next to Jay, and while they danced pretty well together, there was this lack of cohesion. It just didn't feel right. And if you go back to my earlier rankings and time attack coverage, I actually had this concern about Jay possibly lacking the team player aspect to himself. And, we'll kind of have to wait and see what happens when he gets a chance to be in a full group. And, also as a side note, I can't tell if he is actually that way, but I felt his kind of vibe was a bit of a put-on. It felt insincere, kind of like a TV kind of guy. They introduce him and doesn't really know how to act, but he's just kind of acting kind of overly USA teen style. And that said, I gave the performance an 8.6 out of 10, while the judges ranked Jay an all-star, and they gave Na Kamden a 3 out of 4, which means the judges ranked them roughly 8.75 out of 10. Very close to what I did. Now, following a short intermission and missing a chance for some subtle product placement for cosmetics, Mnet decided to revert to showcasing entertainment companies again, starting with an intercompany rival between groups of 4 in both K and G at Yuhua. Yuhua G group consists of Mnet's top G, Zhang Hao, Ricky, Ollie, and Ryan, who together I pre-ranked at an average of 2.75 out of 4. They were good, they had swag, their moves snapped, and I thought Ricky deserved upgrades in my rankings based on his fighting spirit. And I gave their performance an 8.6 out of 10, and I had no issues with it. The Masters gave Zhang Hao an all-star ranking, and the rest got a 3. That's roughly a group average of 3.25 out of 4 stars, or 8.1 out of 10. Now, Yuhua K consists of Han Yujin, Kim Kyuvin, Ji Yanseo, and Yu Sangon, and they were also good. I pre-ranked this group at an average of 2.25, so being of lower stuff than Yuhua G, I expected them to do worse. They put a lot of focus on Han Yujin and Kim Kyuvin, who actually got to do solo dances as well. And I thought that was a little bit cheap, they could have had them all do solo dances in the top 99. But then, in this case, there was a bit of favoritism. And I thought that the group of 4, they were effective in their group performance, but I felt they were strained in their vocals. And I didn't have that criticism of Yuhua G group. So I gave these guys an 8.4 out of 10, which I think lines up with my pre-rankings as well. But the judges gave them an all-star ranking, which confused me because based purely on Mnet's edits, I really didn't see a better performance from them compared to Yuhua G group. And according to Masters, this was a 10 out of 10. A 4 out of 4, but they were clearly vocally strained. Now hold on and let me check my bingo card for suspicious favoritism. Now all of a sudden this dude from Cube, Bak Do Ha, who I have pre-ranked as a 2 out of 4, comes out in a blue silky or satin shirt and dances to My House by 2 p.m. And I was a bit thrown off by this, so I had to go back and see the original performance just to see if it was done this carelessly. And it's clear to me that our boy, Doha, he's lacking, and maybe thought this simpler choreo could be sufficient for him, but really he just showed that he wasn't ready. Because I think there was a lot more subtlety to that performance than even he realized. And there's a brief humorous moment here where they pulled another trainee, Jung Min Gyu, from the bleachers who danced to the same song. And they were both wearing silk shirts, and both ended up receiving 0 stars for their performance. And the judges eventually urged them to perform in unison. And I gave these performances a 5.1 and a 5.4. The cube trainee, Bak Do-ha, was, in my opinion, overextended. He danced slow and was kind of non-impactful. The red shirter, Min Gyu, he did have a voice crack, and despite, being less precise than Do-ha, he actually had a wider range of natural motion, and I felt it was more entertaining from a humor standpoint. It was heartening to see him outperform someone who I had ranked a whole class higher than he was, but at this performance level, it was more that I was kind of let down by Bak Do-ha, who I am now demoting to a B class. In my rankings, the judges made both of them C class, which is lower than my rankings, so after this, they started placing some emphasis on how many songs being performed were choreographed by the masters, and a couple of more 0-star trainees got summarized with a bad singing montage. It led to the judges scolding and warning the remaining trainees. Honestly, I saw a lot of cracking and choking on Girls Planet 999, and some of those people turned out to have really good but untrained voices and would even later debut. And during the show, it's not like they were ambitious about trying to sing and then cracking. Actually, they were the only ones who were even capable of doing that, and they just failed in the moment. Getting back to regional-based groups, Sayak Matthew from Canada, who I had pre-ranked but upgraded to an S class after the episode 0, he got caught over-exaggerating his ability to French. Frankly, it's no better than mine, but I could have sworn that the first words out of his mouth were, "I don't speak French," in French. Gratefully, his performance was much better than his language skills, and I gave him 8.9 out of 10, the highest so far. And he performed so well, Sung Hanbin of K-Group even wept for him backstage, and Mnet had to insert this whole former friendship piece with Hanbin. It's funny how in my preliminary rankings for Matthew and my commentary on him, that the thrust of my main vibe check on Matthew was that he would be a cool friend and roommate. And, now you have Mnet's top K group trainee crying on his behalf. So now Matthew and Hanbin are kind of like BFFs, and, they're the Urina and Xiaoting of this season. And if that friendship holds out, for their sake, I hope it ends better than it did for Urina. The judges end up giving Matthew a 3-star. So next up was Sung Hanbin, who I pre-ranked at a 3, and it's the favored top K trainee of this season. He has the type of face of a leading man, kind of looks like a David Bowie, Christopher Reeve type of K-drama lead. After some bragging about whacking and tutting, Lip J, the whacking queen, did an impromptu onstage whack battle with him. His actual performance was very good, though I did feel he got vocally winded with the singing. I still gave him an 8.7 out of 10, which was just slightly below what I gave Matthew. The judges surprisingly gave him a 3-star, but I thought it was good that he didn't oversell his vocals in applications. It actually shows sincerity, which leaves rooms for kind of genuine improvement, and, I think his talk singing is strong, by the way. The next regional group was Tokyo with Chika, Itsuki, and Uju. The average pre-ranking score for them was 1.3, so I didn't really expect much. Though Ichika is an X class, the other two are B and C class, which are kind of like the lowest scores that I gave. In the end, I gave the performance a 6.5 out of 10. The vocals were not good. They performed Pentagon's Shine, and I feel like they were basically used to lead into Huey or Lee Ho-tek's performance. No star ratings were actually mentioned for the team from Tokyo. And finally, the show ends with Lee Ho-tek. I'm sure he's a bit controversial because, he's already had a debut and he's also revered. So, showing up in a survival show with significantly less trainees, from one standpoint, I guess it is a bit shameless, but I think it would be worse if there was only kind of like one winner in this competition. In the case of groups, I've thought about it from that perspective, and I think it would be a net benefit for his fellow group members. I think something happened similarly with Choi Yoo-jin, and I think to some degree it kind of gives them a lot more confidence in preparing and feeling like they know what to do after the show is over. Similar to Girls Planet ending on a blown smoke cliffhanger, Cube had a trainee, Lehotech, who got to end the show with suspense, and we ended up seeing Mnet's current 1 to 99 ranking. Looking at their current top 9, and I can't remember how this was decided, maybe it's based on FanCam views, but looking at the current top 9, it's not looking good for my S-Class top 9s, as only Kim Ji-woong is there. And, zooming out to the top 15, only 3 of my top 9s are there. But that's the fun of survival competitions, and seeing how your early hunches line up with the judges' feelings, or the audience's feelings. Usually I end up pretty close with the official judges and deviate more from the public voting, but I'm actually glad that this year you can choose the top 9 in the voting. I think that this will create a more balanced group overall, though I hope in the end the final debut group has better management than Kepler did since their debut. And I guess that pretty much brings all this to an end. So that was episode 1. Hi, this is me, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you don't like it, give it a thumbs down. Let me know why. I'm pretty sure I was harsh somewhere, but I can't really remember. Finally, if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing to see the rest of my Boys Planet coverage, and then I can see you in the next video.